We'll have to post like a timestamp where everything starts, where all the technical issues are worked out, but that's fine. So what we were talking about before was that regardless of the outcome of this, whether it was the case or whether it was not the case that our ancestors had derived their B12 from plant sources or animal sources, we both agree that this would not be a reason to not be vegan either way. It wouldn't make a difference. I would take it a step further. I would say, I would make a pleiotropic antagonistic argument for why, if it was not the case that our ancestors got B12 from plant sources, actually, it may even be more of a reason to be vegan, counterintuitively and paradoxically. But that's a whole separate discussion. But so, point being, regardless, it's very little of a reason to do. Actually, it's no reason to not be vegan. Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's an important distinction to make, I guess, just to make sure that everybody knows that we're on the same page as far as that goes. So that's good.
Awesome. So I watched your video, and I guess what were the contentions I have with your video. I'll start with the most contentious. In other words, just the claims that were either cited or made that are most. Well, before I even do that, I think there was something you wanted to go over. Was that the only thing you wanted to go over? That thing, or did you want?
Well, I mean, I think just in general terms, I'm curious what you think. Well, based on watching your video, I'm led to believe that your take is that there's no way that people would have been, fully herbivorous or even mostly herbivorous 150,000 years ago, because the information you have about B12 absorption and availability leads you to believe that it would have been impossible for them to get enough to basically survive. And so they would have had to been eating, animal sources of B12. But you don't explicitly say what you think they were eating. So I would definitely want to talk about what do you think they were eating.
So well, I didn't say the first part either. So the first and foremost, I don't think it's impossible. I wouldn't make there are very few claims that I would say it's impossible, that there's no possible way it could happen. There's a very limited amount of things that I would say that I would use the word impossible for. I think I approach these situations like a Bayesian. So I have my priors. If there's literally no information about anything, I take the principle of indifference, where my priors are 50-50. And the more data that I uncover, my needle toward belief shifts one way or another. So unless I find something like a logical contradiction or something that violates the laws of physics, in that case I would say it's either a logical impossibility or a physical impossibility. If I'm not doing one of those things, it's just the needle that's the ticker. It ticks in the side of, I believe weakly, I believe strongly. So I believe strongly. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think based on the data, all the available data we have, which is actually more robust than a lot of people think. I don't put all the sources in the video. I put the sources that people use to make the claim in the video. But based on all the available data, I think there is no reason to believe that we had gotten our B12 from plants, and B, that based on all the available data, we have reason to believe that they couldn't have. Maybe it's maybe it's the case that it's not impossible, but all the data seems to lead us to that conclusion. As far as how I think they did get it, I will point out two things. The first thing I will point out is that even if I had no idea of how our ancestors got B12, it wouldn't negate my view on saying that we did not get our B12 from this source. So if I say, well, I have enough information to say it's probably not A. Now, even if I had no idea if it was B, C, D, E, or F, it still wouldn't be an attack on my position that it's not A. It would be an interesting academic question. I have some ideas about some candidates, but even if I had no information whatsoever on how we got it, it still wouldn't negate my position on we did not get it from source A.
Yep, I don't have an issue with that. Okay. That's not what I'm really trying to get at by asking what you think we did get it from. but to go back to something you just said a moment ago, where you said, that you're not saying it's impossible or what have you, but the very nature of the video is kind of inflammatory in the sense that you're basically saying that if somebody makes these kinds of claims, they're wackos. I mean, that's what the title says.
Yeah.
So
now wackos,
that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that
Sure.
that makes it sound pretty definitive. That's like saying, like, whatever, there's no such thing as gravity or whatever, where you just said a moment ago that you're fairly certain, or that you think it's highly improbable, but by calling somebody a wacko just because they think that maybe that is the case, that's not exactly the same thing.
So by wacko, so the reason I use the word wacko, and I think it is very appropriate to use the word wacko, is in response to the specific claims that people are making that shows that they assert that this given study, for example, shows that we could have gotten it. And then when you actually look at the study, it's very clear the study actually if anything, it indicates we couldn't have gotten it from that source. That's what I mean by a wacko. By someone saying, if someone comes in and says, hey, look, we were carnivores, humans are carnivores, and they show you a study, and then the study says that humans are herbivores, it's like, yeah, you're kind of a wacko for doing that. It's like, I'm not saying that everyone who believes that humans are carnivores are wackos necessarily. Maybe they're just not as well read on the data or whatnot. But if they read a paper that says humans are not carnivores, and they cite that paper to say that humans are carnivores, yeah, those people are pretty wacko. And so that's how I'm using that word. I'm using that, and that's also why I didn't cite every single study in the book on a lake, on all the different lakes. By the way, we can go through those if you'd like. But what I did cite are the specific studies that people who have been making this claim have been using. And I think wacko is a very appropriate term for them, because they are literally citing a study to affirm that affirm their position when the very study is evidence against their position.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think that's a good explanation of a difference. I'm happy to look at specific studies, and I think one thing that may not have come across to you from my video is that I'm not actually making I'm not taking a position saying that we were indeed herbivorous or fully herbivorous or even mostly herbivorous. I actually, I'm not saying that at all. The things that I took issue with is the other kind of aspects of the video, whereas I think the evidence you did bring now, you've explained why you've brought it. I don't think that was explained well enough in your video for me to understand that that's why you only included that amount of information. And I think to extrapolate that out to say definitely or even most probably or highly probably, just based on the few studies you cited, that's what I take issue with, or took issue with. So that's like one point of clarification that I wanted to make. The other thing is that
so just to close off on that point of clarification. So the reason the amount of studies that were cited, the studies that were cited were the studies cited that clearly either narrowed down to a claim that was made about a different study, or was the same study itself that the individuals making this claim were citing. Had they been citing other sources, I would have included that too. It's not the case that there's, for example, just one source of water on B12. There are over 5, if not over 10 sources of water on B12 that I could think of off the top of my head. There's an analysis of a lake in Israel. There's an analysis of 2 analyses of lakes in Japan. There are analyses of lakes in Oregon. There's an analysis of 9 lakes in England. These are just off the top of my head. I'm rattling them off, but and the same thing for soil too. There's various different forests that have been analyzed. There's different soil lands so the reason for using a forest is it's a natural source. It's not bombarded with pesticides or anything that would interrupt the natural production of B12. And the point is that I'm not just looking at a study and saying, aha, case closed, checkmate. I do a robust analysis when I form a view on this. I can clarify that if you'd like. I can put in the video description and say, oh, by the way, there's a whole bunch more studies that show my position is even stronger than this. Like, that's fine too if you'd like. But yeah,
well, I think the main thing that I want to talk about is that the studies are all looking at water sources pretty much now. Maybe some of them are older. I think maybe the one you cited was like an older one, right? It was like 50 years ago or whatever. But my point is that that is not anywhere indicative of what water sources may have been like 150,000 years ago. We simply don't know. Even in the most pristine remote areas, like you mentioned, like a mountain or a forest or what have you, there is increasing levels of pollution throughout the world. Like you go into the deepest trenches of the ocean now, and there's microplastic there. So it's just that's kind of my main point is that none of the studies I've seen give me any indication of what the water may have been like 150,000 years ago when we're talking about.
Well, sure, that's fine. So the first thing to say to that is, so you may not be able to teleport yourself back 100,000 years ago and look at the B12 content in any body of water or soil. That being said, there are ways to make inferences about them. There are, so for example, if the difference in the conditions, if anything, would favor more B12 production and not less B12 production, that's one inference you can say, okay, well, if anything, the differences would be on your favor and not the other. The other thing to say is that, okay, that's fine, but as a Bayesian, I'm still not saying it's not impossible. I'm not saying that just because I can't teleport back 100,000 years ago and look at the B12 content in any given body of water or amount of soil. That's why I have the view that it's not possible. Not that it's not impossible. But again, as more and more data comes in, my needle shifts a given way. I lean very strongly, highly improbable. And you'd really have to make a good case for like, okay, why exactly do you think the conditions that in some forest, not even attached to the water where there are microplastics, in some area that isn't really inhabited by many humans that much, if any at all, what exact differences do you think were there 1,000 years ago? And why do you think those differences would actually impact B12 content so drastically? Because the difference wouldn't just have to be a little bit. The differences in B12 content in these natural sources would have to be astronomical in order for us to be able to consume sufficient quantities of it.
Yeah, so, I mean, to answer your question, I'm not saying what it would have been. Like I said, I'm not taking an actual position myself. I'm just saying that we don't know what the water was like, and none of the studies you cited in your video or referenced or talked about give me any indication of what it may have been like. And we do know some things, have changed due to human intervention, or even just other kind of environmental factors. So, for example, like farming practices do cause soil erosion and topsoil erosion and all this kind of stuff. Like we know, for example, that iodine deficiency is a very real thing and has very serious health consequences. They have to give supplements to animals. They give supplements to humans in the form of iodized salt to avoid iodine deficiency. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case with cobalt, but it is found in topsoil. Topsoil has eroded. Is there not a possibility that in just like iodine is being depleted by topsoil erosion, perhaps cobalt is also being depleted from topsoil erosion or other agricultural practices. None of the things that I've seen so far even investigate that as a possibility. I just think that's something that could be interesting to look at as well.
Yeah, so I could address both of those things. So the first reason is that's why one of my sources is for soil that has nothing to do with farming. And it has multiple different point estimates across multiple different types of forests, and it's in nature. It's not like some farm. When I say soil, I'm not talking about some farming land that has been monocropped or something like that. Again, you keep going back to, my position is just that we don't know. Well, look, the issue is that even if we don't know, it's still the case that the data to the present day gives us strong reason to believe about what we could have and could not have done 100,000 years ago, even if we don't know 100%. changing the topic to what we could have known 100% is just a red herring. The point is that based on what we know, excluding these factors such as monocropping, iodine, cobalt supplementation, or whatnot, going into areas of nature where we wouldn't expect that to affect any of this, we see levels of B12 where you would have to have an astronomical difference in just 100,000 years. The environment would have to change. And 100,000 years in geologic timescale is nothing, but the amount of B12 difference you would have to have is not nothing. It's insane. And so that gives me an indication. I'm not giving a proof. I'm not saying it's 100%. It gives me a leaning, a very strong leaning for why this is probably not the case, like any other Bayesian. And I think that goes through. I don't see why it wouldn't go through. It's not saying it proves it. It's just saying, based on all the available data, there would have to be a really strong case to make, which those factors you mentioned wouldn't apply to in many of the data points, of why we think there would be such this amazing, great difference for that all of a sudden 100,000 years ago, there's B12 everywhere in hundreds, if not thousands of times greater concentrations than there were before, even in the natural areas that we haven't really changed. Maybe there's some change with some CO2 emissions. Maybe there's some change with the air quality. Yes, sure. But I've never seen any data that the difference of changes that we have induced on the planet we would ever expect to produce such a drastic difference in B12 content in any of these bodies.
Okay, question for you.
Sure.
Looking at animals that are herbivorous, so a bunch of the ruminants that we farm for eating,
Sure.
What do you think accounts for the fact that many of them now do require supplementation? How were they getting B12 before, and what has changed for them?
Well, I'm not sure that they. So, for the first thing I'll point out right off the bat is that even if I have no answer to this, it doesn't negate any of the points I just made.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I understand. But I'm just saying,
as an
something may have
academic,
changed, and that could be, an indication that something
So I
has
do
changed,
think one of
even
the
if we don't
things-
understand how it may have changed.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
So I do think one of the things that you've mentioned is one of those reasons. I do think the reduction in available cobalt in the soil that the bacteria use to produce B12 is a candidate explanation for why certain ruminants may get less B12. However, I don't know if that's a full explanation. And in fact, I'm not 100% sure that the ruminants actually do need the B12 supplements that they're given in many cases. If you had a ruminant in its natural environment today, I'm not talking about on some farm where they're looking to jack up the B12 levels and optimize everything so that they can produce meat with large B12 whatever. I'm not talking about a system where they're trying to optimize meat production. If you had a cow in nature grazing, I don't think that cow would require a B12 supplement, or a horse, even though it's a horse is monogastric. It's found that the colons of horses can actually absorb the B12, whereas our colons can't. For other farm animals, such as chickens and for sheep, I would make the same argument. For sheep grazing, for ruminant sheep grazing, I think if you put that sheep in a natural pasture with the cobalt levels that we would expect, I think they would not need a B12 supplement. For other,
they actually do receive a lot of supplements, though.
No, they do. No, I agree. I agree they do. No, I absolutely agree.
But why do you think farmers are doing that if they don't need it?
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't they look to be minimizing their costs and all this kind of stuff? Wouldn't they not give a supplement that they didn't need?
So there's a couple. So one answer there's a number of answers to that. So when I say don't need it, I don't mean that they need to be in. I don't need that they don't need it in the sense that everything wouldn't be optimal if they didn't give it. It's recommended to keep it for humans, even if they don't need it to supplement. It's just a broad recommendation just because there's no offset. And as far as the cost goes, it's actually really not that costly. B12 is incredibly, incredibly cheap. It's one of the cheapest vitamins you could ever get your hands on. And if they have any concern in optimization for growth, the amount of muscle that an animal could produce in a given amount of time, the amount of growth that the animal will have in a given amount of time, these farmers are looking to optimize everything. And if you could optimize even a little bit with a vitamin that costs chump change. Of course they're going to do it, even if the animals don't need it. They don't care about what the animal needs. They care about what need is relative to a goal. Their needs are, hey, I want to sell as much meat as I can for a given unit of time. I want this machine, that the way they look at animals, I want this machine to be able to slouch up as much muscle.
Yeah.
That's why they're doing it. In my opinion.
So, but in what I'm hearing, let me just ask you back directly. Are you then agreeing with me that something probably has changed in that these ruminant animals do require B12, where they probably didn't in the past?
Oh,
and you're not sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's the case.
What that change might
So I don't know. So the answer is I don't know. I don't know if it's a candidate explanation. But more importantly is that the candidate explanations, if there is a change, it probably would be due to the cobalt. I don't think otherwise there would be any change. And if there was that change would not apply to the data set that I'm presenting, because I'm presenting data where there wasn't nutrient topsoil depletion. I'm presenting data of samples taken in the middle of the forest. All of the reasons we would have to believe that there was a change wouldn't apply to my data set. I don't even know if that is a reason, by the way. I don't even know if that's true.
Yeah.
To be clear, I'm skeptical of these claims that, hey, nowadays they require B12 supplements. I don't even know if that's the case. I'm skeptical of that. I think they're just trying to feed them to optimize things. But regardless,
a lot of people are skeptical about humans requiring it. I mean,
I understand that's very unfortunate, by the way, and that's really dangerous. I understand that I understand, but there's a huge difference here. The difference is that ruminants can rumen. They can, and B12 can be produced in their rumen. We don't have a system like that. Their fundamental anatomy is geared to produce B12 in a way that we simply can't. In horses, the hindgut can be absorbed absorb B12.
I think you missed my point there. I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't take it, and I'm not suggesting that that the people who question whether or not we need to take B12 as humans
I didn't
are
think
right.
that was your point. I didn't think.
But what I'm trying to just say is that this idea that you're saying that you're not sure or whatever, like that can't be used as as an argument for whether or not they require it or not.
I'm not using that as an argument for whether they require it or not. I'm just telling you I'm not using it either way as an argument for whether they require it or not. But what I do think is defensible is that on the human, if a human in 1,000 years ago was looking for sources of B12, it's very, very clear, if I'm not saying it's 100%, but based on all the robust data we have, it's very clear that they wouldn't be able to get it from these sources. Yes, it's possible things could change, but the idea that the changes over 100,000 years would produce differences that would give us this drastic increase in B12 compared to the data set we already have, I think that's highly unlikely. And what about other
abilities, like the ability to absorb vitamin C, and like before we had the ability to make it?
Wait.
And that has changed. Like we
used to be able to make our own vitamin
C
as a human.
I believe so, yeah. What? And then it was lost because we just didn't require it anymore because we ate so much vitamin C from plant sources.
Okay, so I would have to look at that's data that I would have to look into. If you think that vitamin C was I would have to look into the date where that was lost, if anything. I'm not aware of it. I don't know.
Okay, I just looked it up. It says it was way longer ago than what we're talking about. So it says about 61 million years ago.
Yeah, so that's
okay, so it's way too long ago.
Existed.
Okay, fair enough. But I just mean that as a general question that people can change. Potentially something in our gut biome or something may have also changed.
Just a second.
I'm not saying that this is what happened.
No, I'm not. I understand.
Just as some things can happen. Do you think that maybe we had the ability at some point and then it got lost somehow?
Now, if at some point you're talking about 60-something million years ago, I would be inclined to say, hey, that's fair, maybe. If what you're talking about is any time point during the generation of our human species,
I don't want to belabor this point.
We haven't, and I'll know it. Let me tell you why. Because we haven't seen this for any other vitamin. we've never seen the ability for us to make our own vitamin exist during the 100,000 years that was just somehow lost 100,000 years ago. When we're talking about these changes, we're talking about millions and millions of years ago.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't want to belabor this point. That's fine.
Okay.
I should have looked that up beforehand, so sorry about that. But so anyway, my next question that I want to ask you is, what do you believe much more recent, like people that were living in either fully vegetarian or like nearly vegetarian societies, how are they getting their B12? In like any time really before the advent of supplementation, which was like what in like the middle of 20th century.
So I'm not aware of any vegan society or colony or whatnot, or tribe that has existed over 10 years prior to the advent of supplementation, or even 7 years prior to the advent of supplementation. The closest I've gotten was the Vegan Society, when they went vegan, and they did actually go vegan prior to the advent of supplementation, but it was close. They actually took a risk. They not knowing that they took a risk. I don't think they knew about it at the time. But other groups of people were not vegan. They were vegetarian. They were consuming dairy products, if not eggs, if not other things. So I would imagine they would get their B12 from those sources.
Okay, that's fine. So my next question to follow up on that is then, why do you think that even groups nowadays who are even not just vegetarian or like lacto-ovo vegetarian, but are full-on omnivores and eating like lots and lots of animal products, presumably with way higher levels of B12 than those older societies would have, like the Jains, like various like Hindus or whatever. People in India, like the Tarahumara in Mexico, other kind of like plant-based societies, or largely plant-based societies. Why do you think that those people are still, B12 deficient?
So it depends how you define B12 deficiency. There's various different cutoffs, and what you find in omnivorous populations is that the level of B12 deficiency, the percentage of them that are B12 deficient, can range from up to, I think, 40% to down to a very small handful of percentages, depending on where the cutoff level is set. What I haven't, so that's one factor. One factor depends what you use to define, what level of B12 you use to define B12 deficiency. I would have to look in the data more thoroughly about methylmalonic acid in omnivorous populations. That's really what I would be interested in looking at to classify them as B12 deficient. I would have to do that. But to answer your question, I think that a lot of people are not that classify themselves as omnivores. I don't know how much of B12 rich foods that they're actually taking. The standard American diet isn't exactly a diet that may be optimal for this, although it probably does have a decent amount of B12. There are conditions that people can cause a B12 deficiency that are independent of their B12 intake. Some of those conditions include pernicious anemia. Some of those conditions, one of the most common ones is pernicious anemia. But there are other
and age-related changes too, like the lowering of gut acidity and all this kind of stuff can affect it as well. So, but my point is this. I mean, there are people who were like very, very largely plant-based. So if you look at the Okinawans, the kind of recent or the frequently cited, stat is that they ate like 90, whatever it is, 95, 96% of their calories from plants, very little animal products. The people on the Isle of Crete up until like the mid 1900s, they were like 93% plant-based, at least the poor people. That would have all been before supplementation. Like if those people were able to get sufficient B12 from 7% of their calories from animal foods, like it just doesn't sit right.
Well, hold on. When you say, I have to stop you there. I have to stop you there. When you say they're able to get sufficient amount of B12 with 7% of their calories, it's important that we're using sufficient with the same standard, right? So in other words,
I'm just saying, like, they were, they presumably lived there for hundreds, possibly thousands of years, They were fine. They had really good health outcomes.
But that's not the standard that's used to classify Americans and the standard omnivores. So the classification for sufficient B12 criteria is not if they are able to have good health outcomes and they're able to just be there and live their life. That's not how we're defining B12 deficient. Well, we're defining B12 deficiency, it could be like something other than this amount below this certain threshold of B12 level, or below this certain threshold of methylmalonic acid. We're not...
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But for the purposes of our discussion, we're talking about the 150,000 years ago, presumably the idea that we're able to survive at least long enough to procreate. I mean, that's what we're talking
so
about.
That's, sure. But
to that kind of level.
Yes. So it's important to realize that the anemia and the neurologic symptoms happen at very different at different concentrations. It's the anemia, I believe, happens with a greater the anemia, you'll see it happen at the threshold of a greater B12 concentration than the neurologic symptoms. You really do have to deplete it further to get to the neurologic symptoms. I think, if anything, I do believe that you could survive to procreate with a vegetarian diet, getting 7% of your products from animal products to get your B12. I'm not saying it's going to be optimal, and I do think, by the way, if we analyzed those populations, a much greater percentage would come up, quote-unquote, B12 deficient than are coming up with omnivores now. And it makes sense when you look at vegans now, even the ones that are consuming fortified foods but are forgetting to take their supplement, a greater percentage of them than omnivores come up B12 deficient. So the way we're classifying them, if we applied that to your population, they probably would be almost all, if not much greater, B12
Where
deficient.
are you seeing what you just stated about vegans being more likely to be deficient? Because the studies that I've seen that are often touted on pro-vegan sites anyway show that because supplementation is so well advocated for now, vegans are actually less likely to.
Excuse me. I specifically said vegans that did not supplement.
Oh, okay. So you're saying if you don't supplement, almost like on purpose or something, because you're like, it's not natural, I'm not going to take it.
If you don't supplement as a vegan, even those who are probably or inadvertently, I would say, consuming fortified foods. Yeah,
because maybe they drink soy milk or something, and it's got some in there. Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, that I wouldn't argue with, but so if you.
But that's very different. But wait, one really important point. It's important to note that we haven't seen a vegan populace before the advent of 10 years or prior, before the advent of supplementation. That's another data point that's very important. So yes, it does seem consistent with the hypothesis that 7% of your calories, that's enough to get you by. It may not be optimal, but it's enough to get you by in your B12. But 0% of your calories from animal products whatsoever we haven't seen a single example of it.
Okay, so I can see what you're saying about it's enough to survive, but the example I've cited with the 7%, that was the people on the Isle of Crete. They had actually really great health outcomes, and the reason why they were being studied back in, I think it was 1948, the Greek government sent people there to study what they were eating, because they had health outcomes that were significantly better than the mainland Greek people, and also they had whatever it was, I think 20 times lower heart attack risk and all this kind of stuff than people in the US and all this kind of stuff.
Perfectly compatible with my view. Yep.
Yeah. So, but you're thinking that you can have really bad health outcomes with, say, B12, but in all other things, you would be looking like the fit, epitome of good health.
Absolutely, everything is a trade-off, and if you can have good health outcomes with everything else, but suboptimal status of B12, that's totally compatible with my view. It only gets to be a real problem if you're getting levels of B12 that are low enough such that you develop anemia, and really bad, when it gets really bad, is when you have B12 levels low enough to develop neurological complications from it. Then you just can't, then it just degenerates your spine, you won't be able to walk.
But obviously these people weren't
that
level.
That's
because,
fine, they weren't
that's
they
not
weren't
being noted, they were being studied because of their good
that's fine. That's fine. They weren't vegan. That's fine. They were consuming B12.
I know they weren't vegan. And so let's just say, that 90 whatever percent plant-based is enough to not only just survive, but seemingly have really good health outcomes.
Sure.
Okay, so if the people 150,000 years ago, do you think that they were probably in that 90 whatever percent range? They were eating mostly plants, and then they were eating some insects or some small animals that they may have been able to catch easily, or things like that. Is that your view? I'm just curious. Like, I want to clarify what your thought of what is most likely.
Sure. So I don't have a very strong view on this matter. I've briefly delved into the data on isotopes, which are complex. My understanding is that the experts that have looked at that, their consensus is that our human ancestors have survived on a very wide range of different diets, from very plant-based to animal-heavy and everything in between. And that's consistent with what I've seen on the nitrogen and carbon isotope dating methods. Sorry, not dating methods, but isotope ratios. You have different degrees of omnivory or carnivory, or I shouldn't really say carnivory, but plant-based.
Well, you can, because carnivory in the sense of like the Inuit. I mean, they eat very, very carnivorous, and they're definitely surviving to the point of procreating and perpetuating their peoples.
My tentative
but they don't have good health outcomes.
No, they don't have
the modern world.
Of course.
Yeah.
So my tentative view is that if you're asking me what our ancestors did actually eat, they ate a wide range of things depending on the population. There is going to be some of our ancestral populations that have eaten quite carnivorously, some of our ancestral population that has eaten omnivorously, a whole range of that, and there's going to be a whole range of our ancestors that have eaten very close to a vegan diet. I'm not aware of any population of our ancestors that have only eaten plants, but I'm aware, I do think there's evidence to suggest that they ate overwhelmingly plant-based. That's my view on that.
I mean, I think from all the things that I've studied and read, I mean, there are people like the Jains who, for religious purposes, wouldn't have eaten animal products to the point of even trying to avoid stepping on bugs and what have you.
They were vegetarian. The Jains were vegetarian. They consumed dairy products.
Okay, and there are various other kind of religious orders that would have been vegetarian for sure, but there are some smaller groups of people who were, at least according to what I've read, fully vegan. They're not like whole societies of people, not like a cultural group, but more just like religious orders. There's actually kind of a saint, Saint Francis of Paola, I think his name is. I can send you information on him. But basically, if you read up on him, like, he formed a religious order where the people who were in his, like teaching or whatever they were following his teaching, they were fully vegan apparently. Like, they eschewed all animal products. This would have been in the 1400s, if I remember right, in Italy.
All right, you'll have to. I need data on how long they were doing this, if they were, etc., and how.
And these are anecdotes. These are anecdotes. Okay. So I'm not, I mean, it's an anecdote in the sense that it's a small group of people.
Yeah.
And like, supposedly he lived to be a very old age. Like, I think he was in his 90s or whatever, close to 100 years old. So, that doesn't prove anything. Maybe,
Oh, it's at the very bottom of the evidence hierarchy. It's not just that it doesn't prove anything. It gives us very little reason to shift our needle of belief either way.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing to look at. And
it's an interesting thing. I agree, it's an interesting thing to look at. But in terms of where we end up landing in our belief, it's at the bottom of the evidence hierarchy and gives us the least movement of the needle in whether we lean against or lean toward.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, so I think where we agree, again, I would like to just kind of summarize to this point. Where we agree is that, certainly in the different areas that humans have lived, they probably did whatever they needed to survive. In some cases, like the case of the Inuit, or people living farther north, or during certain, climatic changes, they would have had to eat more or less animal products. But I think, there is a lot of evidence, and I don't think you disagree that early humans were largely plant-based. Like, that is probably what we ate most of. I agree
that there are populations that are mostly plant-based, absolutely. I'd have to delve deep into the data if you're asking what proportion of early humans for a given time frame were plant-based versus not plant-based, however you define it. But I definitely agree that there were definitely just large amounts of humans that were predominantly plant-based. I never disagreed with. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, cool. The next thing I want to ask you about is the your video. You also mentioned duckweed as a source, is like a fully plant-based source of vitamin B12, and that it has been shown to be able to uptake B12 from the water.
It doesn't uptake B12 from the water.
It has bacteria within it, right? Is that how it works?
And it also depends on which species of duck. So depending on which species you're talking about.
Yeah. It's not just like random. You just go into any pond and just find any duckweed, and for sure it has enough. But it can happen with certain conditions and certain types and what have you. So
species that are not native to where, like, just real close.
So I'm not saying that particular duckweed would have been available the 150,000 years ago. That's fine. I know in my video I mentioned the study that was done on the watercress. Yeah, and I know you had an issue with that. I wanted to give you a chance also to say what your issue with that was.
There's multiple issues with it. I can come up with at least 3 or 4 issues right off the top of my head. The first issue with it was they grew it in agar and not soil. The reason why this is an issue is because the diffusivity of nutrients, or actually I shouldn't even say nutrients, any solute in agar is hundreds if not thousands of times greater than in soil in the comparisons I've seen. The second issue is that the concentrations that they put into the agar of B12, not only did they make sure that it was not pseudo B12 and it was real B12, but the concentrations were hundreds if not thousands of times in most of the concentrations that they put it in that we would ever expect to find in soil, even natural soil that we didn't do anything to. And even at the lower range, even at the lowest range, we would still have to stretch the highest value we've ever gotten in a forest. The soil concentration, we would have to stretch it just to get to that. And even if we did that, if you look at the amount of watercress you'd have to eat to get your RDA of B12, you would have to eat kilograms and kilograms of watercress. And the volume that would take up in your stomach, a cup of chopped watercress is about 34 grams. You would have to eat, using every steelman in the book, you would have to eat 2.4 kilograms of watercress, which comes out to be like 16 liters in terms of watercress volume. And if you made it more realistic, instead of using like the outlier, if you use like an average value that you would get from natural soil, like like natural soil found in forest land or whatever, you would probably end up, the values are much higher in terms of how many liters you'd have to take up in your stomach. You would have to take up around 34 liters, which comes out to be over 9 gallons. You'd probably sooner go to the emergency room before you would ever get to the adequate amount of B12 that you would need with the watercress. And even then, in the next problem, it gets even worse than that. The next problem is the B12 wasn't even really in the watercress as a whole. It was only in the cotyledons, the embryonic leaf. It wasn't on the roots or the shoots. It was in the little embryonic leaves. You'd have to pick out kilograms of those cotyledons, and you'd have to store them all up, and you'd have to eat kilograms and kilograms of them. It's just crazy.
Okay, so I'm glad you pointed that out. I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain that. My point in presenting that was not to say that the answer was that they were eating watercress. My point in presenting that is just to say that if the duckweed is shown to be able to, create enough, B12 in the right conditions, and the fact that the watercress can be shown to also uptake B12. Now, again, it's a very minuscule amount and whatever. My point is not to say that that is how people got their B12. I'm just saying that, don't you think that maybe there are other plants that we also haven't looked at, that we do need to study, that we have to look at, that potentially can do the same thing? That was my only point in presenting.
I can respond to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can respond to that. So it's always possible that we'll find some plant out there that can do it in the environment where humans have evolved in. That's always a possibility. However, it's not just one example. Remember, I'm just using this example because you brought it to me, just like in that video. There are other examples where they've looked at the roots of soy, where they've looked at other plants. There are other examples I'm aware of. And there are various examples where they tried to put a bunch of B12 and see if they've absorbed it. And the only cases where they were able to get these results is where they loaded these plants with B12 to degrees that you would never expect to ever find it in the natural world. Even when they use soil, they actually loaded it with a greater degree when they were using soil rather than agar in this watercress study. If you actually calculate out the concentration of B12 it takes to get any real amount of absorption that you would have a reasonable case of eating, it's insane. And even then, you'd have to eat a decent amount of it to get anything realistic. So it's not just that I'm looking at, oh, here's watercress. Aha, case closed, checkmate. Here's duckweed.
No. And I wasn't presenting it like that either.
Yeah. And I there's a broad range of data that I look into, and every piece of data gives me a leaning, like any other Bayesian inference. So after we look at this plant, okay, turns out you'd have to saturate it like crazy to get B12. Okay, let's look at the next plant. You have to saturate it like crazy to get B12. Let's look at the next, et cetera, et cetera. After any time, like at some point, it's like, okay, yeah, it's possible if I open this many boxes and I see like the answer is no every time. It's possible the next box can say yes, sure, but based on what my probability leaning is, it's probably unlikely.
And what about Nori? Have you looked at any information about Nori? Like a lot of people say that that can contain B12. I know all the most even optimistic writings about it have said that they need more studies to be done. It's not a sufficient.
Are you talking about chlorella or Nori?
Nori, like sheets of Nori that you would have on like sushi.
Oh, if I recall, my understanding of Nori was that there was pseudo B12 in it. I could be, I'd have to review that, but I believe the issue with Nori was that it contained pseudo B12, and that could actually reduce. I can look that up real quick.
Sure.
Like Nori pseudo B12. It's not working for me for some reason. You all okay? I'm probably spelling it wrong.
I believe it's spelled Nori, but. So.
Yeah, I don't know why Google's not working. Okay, well, weird. But if I recall correctly, the issue with seaweeds in general is that they do contain B12, but the issue is they're not separating out the pseudo B12. So the reason this is an issue is, I realized what I did wrong. Pseudo, can't spell. Pseudo B12. Very good. Yeah. Okay. So if I recall, the issue with here we go. Nori and mushrooms. Yeah, I think veganhealth.org has a pretty good reference on this. So that's Jack Norris. He's a vegan RD. So Nori, B12 analog. Yeah, analog content of Nori. Exactly. So B12 has analogs. So the content, the analog of B12 that results in it being bioavailable to humans is dimethylbenzimidazole. It's a specific, I forget the name of it, but actually it's bugging me now that I forget the name. Dimethylbenzimidazole. Dimethylbenzimidazole. B12. 5,6-dimethylbenzimidazole, that's the one. So if the ligand is 5,6-dimethylbenzimidazole, that's what makes it bioavailable B12 for humans. But you can have other ligands on the B12 that makes it pseudo B12. And it's dangerous to consume this. And those are known as B12 analogs. The reason it's dangerous is not only does it interfere with your absorption of real B12, it actually can deplete your B12. It is dangerous to consume these pseudo B12. It can actually, instead of improving your B12 status, it actually can worsen your B12 status. And
I believe that's the case for spirulina, but I don't think that's the case for Nori.
All right, well, let's take a look.
B12. Because I think for a while, like there was like I don't know, kind of chatter that you could get B12 from spirulina, but I believe that is the thing that has the pseudo B12, the analogs, or whatever it's called.
Let's see. So, various batches of nori were found to contain significant amounts of B12 analog. So, analog is a pseudo B12. One study verified the molecular weight through paper chromatography, indicating that there is a good chance that some of the B12 is active. Yamada determined that nori contains what they considered to be active B12 analogs using various assay methods, not reported here. Yamada tested nori due to the results of see if methylmalonic acid, gold standard, was found. Raw nori was purchased, and I think what they did was I think there may be some trials in looking at like B12 content in people that consumed it. Inactive versus active B12 was determined if and confirmed by paper chromatography. The results shown in table 9. Okay, here we go. So nori's impact on urinary methylmalonic acid. So it looks like they did a study, number of subjects, dry nori and raw nori. B12 found to be analog, 65% and 27%. So it does have B12 analog. Not 100% of it is pseudo B12, but a good chunk of it does appear to be pseudo B12. And so that's very concerning. The concern is that pseudo B12 not only inhibits the absorption of real B12, but it actually can drain your B12. And so I can look further because last time I looked at this,
that's fine. I was just curious if you know much about that, because I admittedly didn't know about it. It was just one of those things. To get back to the main point here about the plants, I'm just simply stating, and again, I didn't bring up the watercress as the answer of like this is what they would have been eating. I'm just saying that knowing that it's capable of uptaking, even if it's just a little here, a little there, things can add up. There is some in the drinking water. There is some in the plants, or in certain plants anyway. There is some in manure or whatever that people would have been eating as contamination or soil directly. All of these things do contribute at least, and that was my point.
That's not how it works though. It's not like this. There's this cumulative uptake and the B12 content just keeps on going up and up. Even if you expose it to like small amounts.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying just like when you eat anything, like that's how you don't have to get all of it in one specific plant.
Even if you got it from it, you can go from anything in nature. No. You go for anything in. Look, the point is that we can go to any naturally occurring food that in our ancestry that would be available to us. By the time you've gotten your RDA B12, your gut will have exploded, based on all the plants we've examined, based on all the water we've examined, based on all the or unless you die from some like toxic algal bloom or something. But, even eating your own feces wouldn't do it. You can get enough B12 by eating your own feces if you really go out of your way, but 98% of it is pseudo B12. Everything we've looked at indicates that you would never get close to doing this. And it's not like we've looked at only a few things. The fact that we found plants that can absorb some amount of B12 such that you could maybe eat it if your gut can hold 9 gallons of it. If you saturate it with amounts of B12 that have never been found in nature. How you get to that, to saying in ancient times some other plant there's an even reasonable chance that you would have had some other plant. Well, maybe, but why would we ever think that? And if we were, and more to the point, it seems very unlikely.
But with the duckweed, again, we're saying that plant wasn't available to like large amounts of people. But I'm just simply saying, you have no real indication of all of the plants that people would have been consuming 150,000 years ago.
I don't need to.
Well,
this is very important. No, I don't. Nope. I'm not saying you need to know. I'm just saying that it's not. There's no proof that for sure there would have been some other plant that could have provided it. Don't need that. I don't need to make my case go through. I don't need to have a proof that no other plant could have provided it, because my case is not that it's impossible. So if that's what I need to provide, it's just a confusion of what my view is. So again, I think the point of confusion here is that you seem to be thinking my position is that it's not possible or it couldn't be the case, because you always seem to be shifting this burden of proof to be sent to be, well, you don't know what if any other plant could have done. It could have had this, or you don't know if it. I don't need that to have my view that it's improbable or highly improbable. I think the case is very clear.
I'm not shifting. I don't feel like I'm shifting the burden of proof. I'm just simply going based. No. Let me clarify. I'm going based on the video and based on the information that we clarified at the start of our discussion, which is that I felt like your video was calling out anybody who was basically suggesting that it would have been possible for early humans to get their B12 from these other various sources: water, soil, manure, plants, whatever. And when we started this conversation, you basically clarified your position in saying that not everybody who believes this is a wacko. The people that you're calling wackos are the people who are citing these specific sources of information that you are debunking in your video.
Or they're just unaware, or they're just unaware of the data a bit broad. They don't have to be a wacko. They could just be not aware of the data. But the point I'm saying here is that now that we've clarified my position, you still seem to be using words like using phrases such as "you don't know about all the other possible plants," just things like that. Like, I don't need to. Again, like when I examine...
No, that's fine. You absolutely don't need to. You absolutely don't need to in order to state that you believe it's highly improbable that people could have gotten their B12 from these sources.
Yes.
I have no issue with that. I would never have made my video if that's how you said it. But that's not how you said it in the video, and that's why I made my video.
Wait, so what did I ever say that it was impossible in my video?
Like I said, the main contention I had with your video is that the title itself is saying that it's vitamin B12 wackos, though.
Okay, so the issue was the word wackos?
Yeah, I mean, basically the whole tone and kind of like, feeling of the video is one that basically paints this argument that if you believe this, you're a wacko.
Okay.
And if you had just simply said, I think it's highly improbable that this would have been the case, and that people may have been largely plant-based and probably gotten sufficient B12 from, a small amount of animal products or insects or, whatever the case may have been in that particular, area, then we wouldn't have had, we wouldn't be having this conversation because I wouldn't have made my video.
So we agree. So just so we're clear here, we agree that there's nothing wrong with me taking the view that based on the available data, it is highly improbable that our ancestors got sufficient B12 from only plant products.
Yeah, I have no issue with you saying that. I don't have a problem with you saying that it's highly improbable. That's fine.
Cool, great. Now that I've answered, is there any other? Because I have questions for you, or actually just responses to things that you said in your video. Is there any other question that you have for me? I think one thing you mentioned is, why would I make a video like this? Why would I do this? What are my motivations or something? And then you said you don't like to go into motivations, but then you were like exasperated or like, oh, why would he make a video like this? Or if you don't have any other questions, I can go to questions for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, basically, yeah, we can sum up this and then we can move on to other points. In my video, I tried to make it obvious that I don't have a position on this. So I wasn't trying to tell people that indeed we were definitely vegan 150,000 years ago or at any point in our development or whatever. I think based on everything I've read and what I've seen, I think it's very probable that we were extremely largely plant-based, so mostly plant-based. We probably did eat insects. We probably did forage. Any kind of other food sources that were available. I think. So
this isn't what I was
existence
asking.
Was, yeah, okay, but I just wanted to clarify.
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify. So my position was never one that set out to disprove your contention that it's not probable.
Here's what I want agreement.
I was simply taking the position that based on the studies you cited, I don't think that is sufficient information to say without a shadow of a doubt that that it couldn't have happened or that it couldn't have been the case.
Cool. Do you think that there's any reason to believe that it was likely that our ancestors got sufficient B12 only eating plants?
Is there say the question?
Do you think that there's evidence that suggests that it is likely that our ancestors got sufficient B12 only eating plants?
I haven't seen it, so I wouldn't say that. And I didn't say it in my video either, and I'm not making that claim now either.
Okay, cool. Do you think that, okay, next question. Do you think that only herbivores can get atherosclerosis?
No. From what I've seen, you can feed certain kind of like crazy diets to even carnivorous animals and induce atherosclerosis, but it's from my understanding a diet that is extremely unnatural to them. So something that they would not be eating in the wild.
Do you think animals? Do you think animals in nature that are not herbivores can get atherosclerosis?
Like living fully like a natural, like out in the wild doing their thing, not being forced to like scavenge off of like human dumps or whatever, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen any. Do you have it sounds like you have like a specific case that you want to bring up.
Sure. There's a case of spotted hyena that has been found with atherosclerosis.
Are we talking about an anecdote or a species? I couldn't tell from what you're saying.
We're talking about a case. A case.
Okay.
They looked at. Well, it was a case. I mean, it was more than that. They looked at various different orders of carnivora with lesions. Let's see. They found sloth bears with fibrous plaques. They found 2 fibrous plaques with a spotted hyena. They found 3 with a golden cat. They found a Weimaraner dog with 1. And then
but we're so is this one study that we're talking about?
Well, the claim, the reason I mean, I've seen more than this, but the reason I'm mentioning it is because you mentioned William C. Roberts and you cited him, and he made a specific claim. To refresh what his claim was, quote, atherosclerosis only affects herbivores. Dogs, cats, tigers, and lions can be saturated with fat and cholesterol, and atherosclerotic plaques do not develop. The only way to produce atherosclerosis in a carnivore is to take out the thyroid gland. Then, for some reason, saturated fat and cholesterol have the same effect as in herbivores. The cats also did not have lipoprotein lipase deficiency. Oh, so that's his claim. Sorry. That is his claim. It's unequivocally a false claim. Demonstrably false. He also made another claim saying it wasn't possible. He said, it is not possible to produce atherosclerosis in a carnivore with one exception, and that is in carnivores who have hypothyroidism due to thyroidectomy. Notice how he didn't say what's forbidding them is just an unnatural diet. He said even if you saturate them with fat and cholesterol, the atherosclerotic plaques do not develop. He opened up his paper with a blatantly false claim. Anyway,
go ahead.
So I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is because you cited this as a potential like counter to my view. You mentioned William C. Roberts. I don't know if at the time you weren't aware of the fact that this was just a false claim. Maybe you became aware of it later, but it's a demonstrably false claim.
Well, my video isn't hinging on that one guy or what he thinks. I'm not here to answer for him or when he made that statement or when these other bits of information that you're referring to, when these studies came about.
Do you think it's a true statement?
About the thyroid, being removed, and then they can get
here's the
atherosclerosis.
statement. The only atherosclerosis only affects herbivores. Dogs, cats, tigers, and lions can be saturated with fat and cholesterol, and atherosclerotic plaques do not develop. The only way to produce atherosclerosis in a carnivore, the only way, is to take out the thyroid gland. Then, for some reason, saturated fat and cholesterol have the same effect as in herbivores. Do you agree with this claim?
Okay, so first of all, I don't think that has anything to do with this discussion. I'm happy to answer it, but I just want to point that out. We're really going...
No. It has to do with the discussion because it was in your video.
From a study that talked about various researchers who believe that that people are plant-based. So
yes, one of the people you cited was William C. Roberts, who said, "Yep."
That's fine. So my take on this is that even the wording of it is, I'm not really sure if that's a direct quote or if there might be some information missing or whatever.
No, it's a direct quote. It's a direct quote. It's not missing information.
That's fine. But it just says that they can be saturated. It doesn't say their diets can be saturated. What does that even mean? That they can be saturated?
Here's what it says. It says the only way. The only way
Yeah.
To produce atherosclerosis in a
I'm
carnivore is
saying
to take
that
out thyroid hormone.
grammatically the sentence is incorrect. Like what I'm saying
No,
is
no,
that
no. It's
even the
not. It's
sentence
not a
itself.
grammar issue. It's not a grammar issue.
I'm
It's a
saying
claim.
it sounds like the grammar is even wrong, because it just says like the only way they can get it is even if they are saturated with, what is it? So
No,
read that part
okay.
again
I'll
with,
read it. Here's the whole quote. Here's the whole quote.
no,
okay.
no, no. Just start from the part where it says like
Mhm.
even if they are saturated with, what is it?
No, it's a different. That's a different sentence. Okay.
Just read that
so
sentence.
First sentence number. I'm going to read both sentences because there's two different claims. So first sentence. Actually, three sentences. First sentence: atherosclerosis only affects herbivores. Okay, that's claim number one. Claim number two: dogs, cats, tigers, and lions can be saturated with fat and cholesterol.
Okay, stop right there. So they can be saturated with fat, with saturated fat and cholesterol.
Yep.
This statement, how are they saturated with fat and cholesterol?
Even if we eliminate,
I think he's referring to the diet. That's what I'm saying.
That's
so
fine.
that's why I thought maybe even the quote
pal.
is being kind of weird.
That's fine.
So
even
anyway,
if
to answer your question,
wait. I'm not done. I'm not. No, I'm not.
Statement,
excuse me, pal.
I don't like the first statement because it says only. I'd like to not.
Okay, stop. I gotta stop you. I gotta stop you. No. Listen.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The reason I gotta stop you is because even if we eliminate, because he's been very clear. Even if we say that part isn't clear, even if we say there's some grammatical error, he's been very clear that there's only one way to do it, and it's not possible to do it another way. Quote, "It is not possible to produce atherosclerosis in a carnivore with one exception, and that is in carnivores who have hypothyroidism due to thyroidectomy." It is very clear. There's no ambiguity. Even if you want to harp on the grammar of the other sentence, that is a very
so I'll
clear
answer your question. I'll answer your question. I don't know when he said this. I don't know what information he has since he said this. This might have been from a long time ago. I don't know. I don't know the specifics of when he said it. That's fine. So I'm not here to answer for what he believes or not. I can tell you what I know. That's fine. I'm here to tell you what I have, and I don't even remember this off the top of my head. I just have a vague recollection of reading something about inducing atherosclerosis in carnivorous animals by feeding them a diet heavy in sugar, I believe, is what I had seen. So I didn't even remember this thing about the thyroid. But again, my memory of this is vague. So I wouldn't say that I agree with this because my memory, at least, and I'm not certain of this, so don't quote me on it. My memory is that you could induce atherosclerosis in carnivorous or it may have even been omnivorous animals by feeding them like high levels of sugar as well. So, and I think it was carnivorous animals, but I don't remember. But based on just my memory, I would not agree with this statement, which is fine. So what's the problem?
Okay. No, the way, well, again, if we're allowed to interpret each other's videos without things that they've said, the way you presented this in your video was that, here are some potential counters to Avi's view. And then you said you went through different things, none of which, by the way, are counters to my view. I went through all of them, and they're all either consistent with my view or just false claims that you've cited from other people. So just so we're clear, what we can agree on, because you made a video that says debunking me, and it seems like the whole video is debunking a misunderstanding of what my video said, which didn't say. Let me just ask you this: is there any claim that I made in my video that you think is incorrect?
Again, my issue with it, I've tried to clarify, I'll try to clarify again. My main issue with your video is simply that I felt like the video was basically trying to say that it's impossible that people would have gotten B12 from purely plant sources and or environmental things like the water, like the unwashed produce and the manure, etc.
Is that a claim that was in my video?
Again, I just told you that it was based on the whole style of it, the title of it, and what was basically stated, and basically the whole attitude of it, and the whole point of the video was that if you think this, you're a wacko.
Okay. So based on your interpretation of a claim that wasn't made in my video, that you interpreted that it was made.
I don't have the quotes written out. I don't know exactly which sentences were this. It's not my interpretation. It was the way that it was said, and I mean I can't remember the exact ending words, but basically it's when Isaac is singing your praises about how You're happy to shit on vegans, if they make these kind of crazy claims, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, again, that is what the video ends on, is that you're happy to basically, prove like people wrong if they believe this, and to call them out and call them wackos.
So what proposition in the video do you actually disagree with that is actually in the video? Or is it just so when you say it's not your interpretation, I just hear you saying, well, based on the things that the tone that I've got, based on the style that I've gotten, based on those are all interpretive. Those are all telling me that you're interpreting it. Is there any proposition in my video you disagree with?
I think you're misunderstanding. Your video makes it sound like it's impossible that people could have obtained sufficient B12 to survive. I'm not talking about optimal levels. I'm not talking about getting the recommended daily allowance of the whatever it is, 2.4 micrograms or whatever it is. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just saying enough to survive. Basically, we're talking about 150,000 years ago. We're not talking about optimal health outcomes. We're not talking about the daily recommended limit.
Do you know the first few words the video opens up with? It opens up with, you're not going to get your RDA of B12 from plants.
Yep. That's fine. That's what it opens up with, but what does it end with? Like, it ends with basically saying that
it's impossible? It doesn't end with that.
No, it ends with like basically stating that if you think that people were fully herbivorous, I don't even know if it ends with that, but at some point they say, like you guys say in the video, that we couldn't have been fully herbivorous.
Okay, so if that's what is said in the video, then I will clarify and say, based on what we know, it is highly unlikely that we could have been fully herbivorous. And is that what this is really all about? That's your debunk video. That instead of saying we couldn't, so just so we're clear, you made a debunk video because instead of saying it is highly unlikely that we could have been herbivorous, it was said that we couldn't have been fully herbivorous. That's the extent of your debunk video. That's the issue you take.
Yeah, that's my main issue that I take, yeah.
Okay. All right, pal. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up then. I will look through my video and see if that's what was said, and and see if it's clear that we were saying it's impossible or something. The word impossible is never mentioned, but if we said you cannot get your B12 herbivorously, even then I think it would be implied that I'm not saying it's impossible, but hey, if that's what the extent of what this debunk is, that the extent...
Avi, just look at what you just grilled me on about Robert's quote. You didn't like the word only.
No, I didn't. It wasn't just
Words
that.
matter.
No, listen, it wasn't just only. He clarified it.
Okay,
no, he said it's not. He actually said it's not possible. No. He actually said it's not possible.
I'm simplifying it to the point of a single word, but it's the same idea. What you're doing. You don't like his absolute take on his stance.
Except
you
that
could
I don't think I
reword
gave,
his stance.
Excuse me.
You could reword his stance to not say only, and with the thyroid. You could reword his stance and say that pretty much it's extremely rare to see carnivorous animals develop atherosclerosis eating their natural diet. If he just said that, you wouldn't have an issue with it, right?
Okay. So just so we're clear, it's not a wording issue, because the reason it's not a wording issue because he makes it clear over and over again what he's talking about. So he didn't. If he just said only, then, and it was just in one iteration, then okay, maybe. Even though that's true, you can make a pedantic point about it. But he further made other claims that made even stronger claims. He said, he didn't just say only, he said it is not possible unless this happens.
Yeah.
It's not.
I agree. He did it multiple times, but your issue with it, what I'm saying, your issue with his statements, are that he's stating as an absolute his point. He's doing it multiple times with like various sentences that you've got in the quote there. But your issue with him stating these things is that he's stating it as an absolute. My issue with your video is that you're stating it as an absolute.
No. I don't actually think I was saying it as an absolute. I never used the word impossible. And if I were to say that you can't get it, I think it's highly implied, if not obvious, that I'm talking about that it's highly improbable, not impossible. William C. Roberts used the word impossible. He's actually said it is impossible. I want to know where I took an absolute view on this in my video. Where I really don't think maybe it's possible that I did. I don't think I did. I don't think I took an absolute stance. And I think look, people are watching the video and record and going right now to see if I ever said this. I didn't say the word
fine.
impossible.
I mean, we can.
Absolutely.
I don't have the quote in front of me either. I'm just telling you why I made the video. That's
all
it.
right.
You asked me why I did it.
Cool.
That's why I did it.
So, all right. So the extent of our disagreement is whether instead of highly improbable, you think I was making a claim that it was impossible.
Yes. That's the point of contention.
Well, look, I will.
I want to go back to how we started the discussion. I told you I think we agree on more things than we disagree with, than we disagree on. Mm-hmm. So, I would just want to circle back to that and say that the most important thing is that it doesn't matter what people did or did not do 150,000 years ago. It doesn't even matter what they did 10 years ago. What matters is doing the right thing, and doing the right thing is not exploiting animals and taking a damn B12 supplement. So, we agree on that, and I think that's the most important thing. So I'm not here to bash you. I'm not here to bash anybody else who kind of takes the same view that it's unlikely or even
so just to be clear,
unlikely.
we said extremely improbable. So we didn't say impossible. We said extremely improbable.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean,
so
maybe,
where's
again,
the absolute?
I'll go back and listen.
Okay.
I'll go back and listen to it, and if you want, I'll tell you exactly which thing triggered me. I know the title triggered me because I don't like the kind of name calling style things. But again, like, this idea is just that it's this absolute thing that, like, if you believe this, you're a wacko, and I take issue with that.
So the first thing. So I asked you, what did you debunk? You said the absolute stance. It's clear that we have people watching it right now. They said we took a stance that it's extremely improbable. We didn't say it was impossible. So it's clear that we didn't take an absolute stance. We took a high probabilistic stance. Okay, so that's not a debunk of that. Is there anything else that you think you've debunked?
Like I said, I simply pointed out other things that could be considered before stating unequivocally that it's impossible.
Wasn't unequivocally.
That it's.
I know you, but here's the thing: when you make a debunk video of someone else's video, presumably.
All right. If you want, I will open your video right now, and I will find you the point of the main point of contention. Give me 1 second,
and just specifically, what I want is a proposition that you think you've shown to be untrue. Yeah, watch the video and find me
Avi,
something.
I don't care what you want. I'm gonna tell you what part of your video made me.
I'm not
triggered.
interested in what. No. I'm not interested. No. When you say you're debunking me, you're not saying that you're getting triggered at me. That's not the same meaning.
No. What? No. I'm not being triggered at you. What triggered me to make my video is not the word. Don't use the word triggered.
Interested.
Sorry.
I'm not interested in what triggered.
Let me use a different word. What actually prompted me to make the video?
I'm not interested in what prompted you to make the video. I'm interested in what you think you've debunked me on. What proposition do you think you've shown to be false? When you say you debunk someone,
I'm trying to find the information for you, so if you can just hang out for a second.
Okay. What error is there in the video? Can you point to any error?
Okay, here we go.
Do you want to do a watch together so we can watch it together?
No. So you said who's not got some insane ideological bias, who's demonstrated their willingness to criticize vegan bullshit. That phrase, again, you're basically saying that if anybody takes this view, they have an insane ideological bias.
Was not said.
That is literally what the last sentence that Isaac says.
It said what it said is that I do not have insane ideological bias. That's true. I agree with that. That's not an erroneous statement.
No. Listen. Yeah, and who's not got. So that means that somebody who does believe this does have an insane ideological bias. That is the point of the video.
The point of the video is that I'm someone who does not have an insane. Well, that's not the point of the video, but the statement that he said is I'm someone who does not have an insane ideological bias. I think that's a true statement. I don't think that's erroneous. Also, it's not the case. It doesn't follow from that and my view is that anyone who does believe that does have some insane ideological bias. As I said, it could
It's implied. It's implied.
I don't look. No. What's implied? what I
Anyways,
think is.
Avi,
So, but
we're
wait.
beating
What
a
you
dead
said.
horse, and as vegans, we shouldn't be beating any animals.
Excuse
okay?
me. Excuse
Listen,
no. Pal.
You're
What
way beyond,
statement is
like,
wrong? What statement is wrong? Show me it. Look, you made a debunk video
It's-
on me. You make videos.
I didn't
on
say
me.
the statement is wrong. I
Okay,
told
cool.
you what I have
you
an
think-
issue with.
do you-
What
okay,
I
but
have an
that's not-
issue with is
Okay.
that when you watch this video, your understanding of what the point of the video is, that is, if you think these things, that maybe humans did get their B12 from these sources, that you are an ideological, insane wacko.
Okay. So if you have that interpretation, then what you can do is you can say, I have a suggestion. Your suggestion is, how about you clarify X, Y, Z? What would be something that would be ridiculous to do is to upload a debunk video when you haven't actually debunked anything.
I don't think you debunked anything, and you uploaded a video that says,
"Oh yes, I did.
Debunked.
I did.
No, you didn't.
So
you didn't
debunk
debunk
anything.
anything.
So one thing I've debunked is that there are certain papers cited as evidence that you could get B12, and I've debunked.
You didn't say I'm debunking a handful of videos or a dozen a dozen studies or a handful of studies. You said you're debunking vegan B12
wackos.
Wackos.
Okay, so you didn't understand. Okay, so it was ambiguous.
So that's what you're stating, and the very
this is
very
just a
beginning of the video says that it's impossible for you to.
No,
get,
it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't
does.
say the word impossible.
Listen.
It doesn't. Where is the word impossible?
Hold on.
Show
I'm going to
me.
listen to what he says
Wait,
again.
just so we have it on recording. We have this on recording.
You're not going to. It says you're not going to meet your. You're not going to meet your RDA. Okay, so
that's right.
Again.
Where does it say impossible?
We're talking about early humans, 150,000 years ago, surviving. Then your video cleverly starts by changing it to say you're not going to meet your RDA.
Where does it say it's impossible?
The point is that your video is talking to people who you're calling ideological wackos, who think that humans 150,000 years ago would have been fully vegan and only getting B12 from these other sources, plants, water, earth, manure, and you're calling them wackos. And then the video starts by saying that you won't be getting your RDA. It's like this sleight of hand kind of thing. You're like,
I don't think they would have survived.
I
don't think
you're talking about people who have a theory as to what may have happened 150,000 years ago, as a way of advocating for veganism as being a natural thing, as being something that we're meant to do biologically, blah, 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 whatever. And you're basically deriding them and saying that they are ideological wackos, when in fact, the information you provide has nothing to do with the environment or the things that were 150,000 years ago. You can draw, extrapolations. You can look and infer at things and whatever, and that's fine. I told you I even largely agree that it's probably unlikely. So this is why I said at the beginning that I think we agree on more things than we don't.
Listen.
But what I don't agree with is you calling somebody. No, I'm not rambling. I'm telling you what I don't agree with.
Definitely are. You're not answering
and why
the
I made
question.
the video.
That wasn't the question.
I made the video
Keep rambling.
because I don't like you calling somebody who believes that we would have gotten B12 150,000 years ago an ideological wacko.
Okay.
That's it.
Are you done rambling? Okay, so the reason you were rambling is because you didn't answer a circumspect question. I didn't ask you anything
Avi,
of what you said.
Avi,
excuse me.
Avi,
I let you talk. I let you finish.
I've been nothing but polite to you, but that's extremely
rude.
The reason
That's
extremely rude what you just did to me.
I think that's totally fine because the reason I think that's fine.
No, Avi.
Okay.
It's not okay for you to be rude to me because I have been polite to you.
Listen. You have made.
I have been polite to you, and you're being rude to me.
So
and that's not okay.
I'm not interested in the meta. I'll ask you the same question you didn't answer.
Listen, buddy.
So the answer...
You can take your little, ask yourself, fanboy kind of verbiage somewhere else.
I'm not interested. I'm not interested.
I came here in good faith to talk to you.
Yep.
And I explained my position.
I understand you did.
And you ignored me, and you had your phone in your hand reading some stupid comments from your other fanboys, instead of actually listening to what I said, and then you said that I was rambling.
Well, right now...
You're the one who's rambling and using your silly little fanboy words instead of paying attention to what's being said.
Okay. You're not going to mean it without consuming insane amounts of X. That's what was said. What was not said is impossible. You literally just claimed on camera, on video, that you said the word impossible. That you said the word possible.
Avi, I told you I don't have a transcript of
Then why make the claim?
I was trying to listen to what the video was saying while you were yabbering on, blabbering the whole time. I was trying to listen to what the video says so I could get you the exact quote.
Why make the claim?
I explained very clearly that I don't have the transcript in front of me. So for you to now be like, oh, you just claimed on camera. I didn't claim anything on camera.
Did. You want to rewind it and listen to what your claim is?
Avi, now you're being really, really stupid. Okay.
Oh, okay. Listen, when you make a claim, now you can have an excuse for why you didn't have the right information, but then why make the claim? Look, here's the problem. Here's the thing. Look, we'll tone it down for a second. Look, here's the issue. The issue I have with you is that everything you're telling me doesn't warrant a debunked video because nothing's being debunked. You could come to me. You had an open line to me. You could come to me and say, listen, I think you should clarify a bit more what you're talking about here. What exactly do you mean when you say this? Nothing in that video was a false claim. All of the claims I made in that video were true. Nothing in that, there's not one single claim I made there that is false. Everything I said about those studies was true. Everything I said about the reason studies were true. I don't understand why someone would even think about making a debunk video to something that their issue is the way I've said, is their interpretation of the wording that I didn't even say. I specifically did not use the word impossible. I said I used the word probabilistic. I said it was extremely improbable. And you didn't even know what I was talking about clearly. So just come to me and ask me for clarification.
I know. I knew what you were talking about. I definitely know what you're
talking about.
You were
in my mind.
You're making a video calling out people who say that 150,000 years ago, we may have gotten our B12 from vegan sources, from fully vegan sources, as wackos,
so
as ideological wackos. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing in this video. And I have an issue with that.
Yeah, so people who specifically come and say, we could have gotten our B12 from plants in the past, and here's the evidence for it, because let's be honest, there are plenty of people like that. People countlessly pouring YouTube comment after YouTube comment. You're wrong. See this source. We could have done it. You're wrong. See this source. We could have done it. Those people are wackos. That's what I'm talking about. The other people, they may not be wackos, but they are wrong and they are ignorant of the data. That's my view. You didn't seem to take any issue with that view. But the issue I have with you, pal, is that when you see a video like that, you could have just had a conversation with me. It would have been cleared up in 2 seconds. Instead, you decided to make a debunk video and debunk nothing.
My debunk video is just as valid a debunk as your video. You didn't debunk anything either. You have not proven that people could have or could not have gotten B12 150,000 years ago.
That wasn't the purpose of the debunk video. So here's the specific things I debunked in my video. Okay. So one thing I debunked. No, it's a false claim. You're saying I didn't debunk anything in my video. So first of all, I have to point out several things. Number one, that's a tu quoque fallacy. So even if you want to take the view that I also haven't debunked anything, you're committing a tu quoque fallacy. It wouldn't change the fact that you are still making a debunk video with no debunk. All right, so that's
absolutely a tu quoque. Okay. And what I'm saying is, you're saying to me, well, how dare I make a debunk video about your video and not debunk anything?
That's not a tu quoque.
How dare you make a video and not debunk anything?
That's not a tu quoque. Okay, so even if you have that view, you would accept that we both shouldn't have made those videos.
Well,
that
there
would
you
be
go.
where the conclusion.
I shouldn't have made my video if you wouldn't have made yours.
But
There you
now
go.
the second
We're in
thing.
agreement.
No, we're not.
100%.
No, we're not. The second thing.
agreement.
Excuse me. You're not.
I
Tracking.
would never have made my
Excuse
video
me,
if you didn't make your video.
Excuse me. You're not tracking. The second thing. Excuse
You're
me.
hilarious, Avi.
You're not tracking. The second thing is I actually don't think I didn't debunk anything. I debunked plenty. So the point of me mentioning it too quickly is just it's an overdetermination. So even if you have that view, it's not true. I did debunk things. So here's what I debunked, which is what I sought out to
What
debunk.
did you debunk?
Yeah, that the specific sources are listed as examples of how we would get our B12. For example, sources about water, sources about fecal matter, sources about dirt. We mention this in the video. We say, here's the sources they claim. Water.
Yes, Avi, the reason why people bring those sources is because they're talking about the idea that 150,000 years ago we would have gotten enough from non-animal sources to survive. But you're not
studies.
showing that it's not enough to
sources.
survive.
Okay,
You're saying that it's not enough to meet the RDA, which we know is way higher than you need to survive.
Pal, I know.
At least long enough to procreate.
Pal, I'm talking about just to be clear, my view is also that they probably wouldn't have been able to survive long enough to procreate as well. I also have that view. It's not like it's a different. I'm not taking. Just to be clear to everyone,
well,
I'm not taking the view.
I don't think that was proven by your video.
Oh,
I don't think the
I didn't
evidence
say
you
it was
provided.
Stop. Oh,
so then you haven't debunked it.
No, you don't need to debunk
the idea that 150,000 years ago.
Do you think you need to prove something to debunk it? Excuse me. Do you need to
could have had sufficient B12 to survive based on fully vegan sources?
Do you think you need to prove? Excuse me. Do you think you need to prove something to debunk something?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, cool.
And I do realize the distinction. So I absolutely agree with you. That is a difference.
So you agree that
you don't have to explain why or how it could have happened to prove that something else couldn't have happened. That's
no, that's not even the difference I'm talking about. Okay, so look, we don't, if you take the bar that you need to prove something in order to, so in other words, if someone says you can get X from Y, okay, it could be any empirical claim like that takes that form. You can get phylloquinone from steak, right? If someone makes the claim you can get phylloquinone from steak, in order to debunk that claim, I don't need to prove that you cannot get phylloquinone from steak. If you took that stance, you wouldn't be able to debunk anything in an empirical context unless you force a contradiction or some violation of the laws of physics. What I can do is say, okay, in this steak, there's a minuscule amount of phylloquinone, if any, you would never be able to get, and not even just the RDA, but kissing the toes of the RDA. You would never be able to get anything close to the RDA, not just meet the RDA. And then it could always say, well, you haven't looked at this cow. Have you looked at this cow? And then I say, okay, well, I looked at this cow. Same story.
Avi, you just started off by saying you can't get phylloquinone or whatever the heck this is. I don't even know what that is. From steak.
It's vitamin K1, yeah.
What is it?
In other words, if I say you're not going to get, phylloquinone is vitamin K1. If I make the claim and say you're not going to get phylloquinone from steak, your RDA of phylloquinone from steak, or anything close to your RDA of phylloquinone from steak.
Okay, now you're changing your sentence. So this is like, look, you can just circle back. What is your point of asking me this?
Yeah, the point is that every time you say that I didn't debunk something, you go back to I didn't prove it. The point I'm trying to make here is that in an empirical...
No, I didn't say that. This is my point. Mm-hmm. Your video is made to call out people who are ideological wackos who believe that people would have been fully herbivorous 150,000 years ago, and that is our kind of nature to be so, and that we could have and probably were fully vegan 150,000 years ago. And your video is calling them out to basically say that they are ideological wackos, into even suggesting that it would have been possible to get their B12 from these vegan sources.
So no, that's not the point of my video, but it's interesting you have a mind reading ability like that. So should be clear about what the point of my video is, as I mentioned in the beginning. So number one, the point of my video is that number one, people who make this claim and use those sources are wackos. They are, because they can't read their own sources. Number two, the claim is not just unsubstantiated, but based on the available evidence, it's highly unlikely to be the case. And number three, there is an overarching ideology that does appear, in my view, to be behind this. I do think, based on engaging with all of these people, that they are in fact ideological, but the wackos are specifically to the people who cite the studies in support of it that clearly can't read it. I also want people to drop it from the vegan community because I believe it hurts our movement. I believe it's not good for us as a movement. I believe it's not good for animals as a movement to be making. I think it only gives cannon fodder to the carnists seeking to debunk us. And it's better that I do it than they do it. Because it's unfortunate that it continues, because it really is, based on the totality of the aggregate data, it is highly unlikely this would happen, and we look like idiots when we argue so fervently for something that has that status in the scientific community, I mean, in where the science stands. That's the point of me making that video.
Okay, let me address just one, actually two things. One, you just said that you're calling people wackos who present these sources. I don't have the transcript in front of me again, so I don't remember the exact wording, but to my memory, I don't remember you saying the people who use these sources. I don't remember that being part of your video at all. So for you to say now that is the point of your video,
yeah.
Again, that's not the impression I got from watching the video. I don't have the transcript in front of me. But
wait, before
with all of that aside, with all of that aside,
wait, pal, wait 1 second. Oh my God. Look,
with all of that aside, again, I largely agree with you. I pretty much agree with you that presenting things that are demonstrably false as fact is not good for any movement. See, now you're ignoring me again and being rude. When you're talking to me, where am I focused, Avi?
You're not listening.
Where am I focused when you're talking?
Where
am I focused when you're talking?
Wait, what?
Where am I focused? Where am I focused when you're talking?
Are you going to let me get a word in? Listen.
I'm asking you a question. Okay. I said, where am I focused when I'm talking? When you're talking to me?
You're saying you largely agree with me. You're going to let an issue get aside. You didn't even let me clarify the point of the issue. Like you said in my video, I didn't mention where the word you don't have the transcript, and I didn't mention where the word wackos was coming in.
That's not what I said.
Or sorry, you're right. That's not what you're sorry. You're right. I don't have. You're right. Fair enough. I don't know exactly the word for word that you said, but what I wanted to clarify was that I didn't mention in my video. It was just the title of the video: B12 wackos debunked. Okay. I don't know how that's false. When I say B12 wackos debunked, I didn't clarify anything in my video about what I was about who were the wackos. I didn't distinguish whether it's anyone making the claim or whether it's people making the claim who are using this source. I didn't say anything about that. It was the title of the video, and I just went through the debunk of the sources. I didn't say at any point in the video that it's for everyone who makes this claim.
Okay, obviously, then that's fine. That's what I have contention with. So we've already gone over this. We're literally just repeating ourselves here. Let me just finish addressing the second thing you said, which is basically that you think it's important to do this because it's bad for the movement to propagate false information. And you're reading off to the side. Anyway, I agree with you. I don't think we should lie to people to get them to go vegan. I don't think we should tell them false things just because they're like a pretty, picture of what could be or was the past or whatever, just to try to convince them. I agree with you. So again, I think we agree more than we disagree. I don't think it's a good idea to tell people that for sure we got like B12 from these kinds of sources. I agree with you, okay? But what I think you were getting at before when you wanted to ask me, like, what I mentioned about your intentions or whatever, which is kind of like the second part of my video. What I was talking about in my video is that there are, unfortunately, a lot of people who are anti-vegan who do look at something as in like what happened 150,000 years ago as a justification for why they will not go vegan now. And I think that by basically saying that anyone who says to those people, look, we don't really know, it's possible that we would have gotten B12 even from a fully vegan diet back then, to just say that to somebody, that it's just possible, that they're a wacko and they're an ideological wacko, I don't think is helpful. And I don't think that's a smart thing to do if you're really trying to advocate for veganism. I agree with you that we shouldn't tell people that that is the likely thing, or that that is what probably happened, or anything like that. I wouldn't even give it a 50-50. I told you, I agree with you that it's probably unlikely that we didn't eat some sorts of like small insects, animals, whatever, like probably even foraging like carrion. Like maybe there was leftover bones from some larger predator, and then we went over there and just ate the bone marrow, or who knows. I'm sure there was stuff like that going on. I mean, that's what I would think. So again, we agree on more things than we disagree.
So the issue is not with any of that. The issue is your video was a debunk, and I just don't understand what has been debunked in my video.
What has been debunked is the like impression of anyone who watches your video that it's impossible for people to have gotten sufficient B12 to survive 150,000 years ago on a fully vegan diet.
Okay, so what is debunked was your impression of my video, where I never made that claim, but that was your impression of the video, and you've debunked your impression of that video.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I can take a poll if you'd like, and I can ask people how many people actually got the impression that I said it was impossible rather than highly improbable. But I mean, we can do that if I don't. It's a petty nuance, but
I don't think it really matters. Anyway,
okay. So we agree.
I need to get going because it's getting pretty late. So I think maybe just a few minutes. Let's wrap it up because it's getting to be pretty late for me. So
okay. So what was debunked? So in other words, so just to wrap up. Your debunk was of my video was a interpretation of a claim that I didn't actually make, and clarified up within the first 16 minutes of this conversation. I never explicitly, or even I would argue implicitly said it, but you think I did. Your interpretation of a given claim was that it was impossible. You've debunked that. You have debunked your interpretation of a claim that I didn't make that it was impossible, where I specifically said extremely improbable. I don't see.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. I don't see a proposition or a claim I made in my video that has been shown to be incorrect. My debunk actually was a debunk because I specifically went through the sources that are used to make the claim and showed how not only did they not support that claim, they actually support the opposite claim.
Sure.
But I'm glad we agree on the implications of the data at this point. Okay, I would just encourage you. I would just encourage you in the future. Instead of making a debunk video, just ask me. You have a line to me now. You have my email. If you join Discord, you can see what my in-depth analysis is on Discord. You have a line to me. Just say, hey, you made this video. Can I get some clarity on what you mean by this? Instead of going through this whole waste of time that we just did, this wouldn't have had to happen. I could be working on a carnivore debunk right now instead of doing this. Is that fair?
Well, I think this wasn't a waste of time. I didn't view it as a waste of time. I had a great time talking to you. I think a lot of people probably found it enjoyable and probably learned a bunch of stuff. I think there was more clarity provided both on your position and my position. So I don't think it was a waste of time. But anyway, I mean, my YouTube channel, my decision on what I make videos about. I am not going to clear with anybody topics that I choose to talk about in the future. Somebody asked me to make a response video to your video. I could change the title of it if you'd like, and instead of saying debunking Dr. Avi's debunk, I could just, or whatever the title was, because I don't remember the exact wording, I could change it to say something like sharing my thoughts on Dr. Avi's video. Would that make you feel better? I can change that if you'd like.
So actually, yeah, I mean, no, actually it would, because
I could take out the word debunk and just say sharing my thoughts
I'll tell you why.
On your video.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because the reason is when you say you're debunking someone, the implication is that there is a proposition that you take an issue with, that you think is false, that is stated, that is claimed by someone that you think is false. And within 16 seconds of my video, I made it clear that it's extremely improbable. And I didn't say the word impossible. Instead, if you watch 16 seconds of the video, the phrase extremely improbable was said. And so to say that you're debunking the claim that it's impossible, when
it's fine, Avi, you're like belaboring the point here. I will change the title of the video. I don't think this was a waste of time. I'm happy to change the title of the video. After this, I will go and change the title of the video to say sharing my thoughts on Dr. Avi's B12 claims.
And just to be clear, I don't think it was a waste of time either. I just think that it's an opportunity cost of time, because I think there's a lot more valuable things that I could have spent my time on. And I think that this could have been solved. This clarity could have been made clear in a 2-minute conversation, without going through this whole YouTube shenanigans. That's my issue. And I don't think that's unreasonable.
Avi,
anyway.
I don't know what you did to prepare for this. Let me just say this. I don't know what you did to prepare for this discussion, because I don't even think this was a debate per se. I didn't view it as such. I just wanted to talk to you and clarify the issue. I don't know what you prepared for this. I did not prepare for this. I didn't go and look up stuff. I didn't spend hours researching. You already had your information. We just wanted to clarify the views. Again, if that's what prevented you from doing something else, whatever prep work you did for this, I'm sorry, that was not my intention, is to pull you away from other work that you're doing. I have other things that I am working on, and I'm busy too. So So
my suggestion is, first of all, there's a lot more that goes into than just prep work. Just the logistics of it. People sending me a video. Oh, Conscientious Omnivore says he debunked your video, and then I have to go into comments saying like, oh, actually I didn't say this. Oh, actually this study doesn't show what you're thinking. I have to go into the comments to say, oh, here are you going to debate me? I have to wait a week for you to respond. All of these things are like just taking up mental, if not taking up mental RAM, it's just annoyances and nuances that could have been cleared up. So my suggestion is this, and like, you don't have to agree with my suggestion. My suggestion is, how about if there's something you disagree with me on, or think you disagree with me on, at least reach out to me and clarify if you actually do have a disagreement with me on it before making a debunk video. Is that not fair?
Sure, I think that's fine, and I will try to do that in the future. And I will retitle my video. I give you my word on that.
Thank you. All right, cool.
No problem.
Good talking, pal.
Okay. Yeah, it was good, man. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can talk again some other time.
For sure. All right, take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Cool.